Hello students, in this module we are going to start linear algebra. Linear algebra is a very important subject, and it has very wide implications and deep implications in what we are going to do hereafter in this course. So I'll discuss this in some detail. Traditionally you would have learnt some linear algebra in your undergraduate courses earlier in the mathematics classes in terms of matrices and linear equations and so on. We'll try to now generalize those notions, and we will try to first generalize it to n-dimensional vectors and then eventually to functions which are in some sense infinite dimensional vectors, and we will first go from linear vector spaces to function spaces and eventually to Fourier series, eigenfunction expansions, and then use these methods and principles to solve linear differential equations, partial differential equations. So it's a long journey ahead, but it's something that is very worthwhile, because whatever principles that you're going to learn has enormous implications in many chemical engineering analysis. Okay, so we'll start from very basics and then we'll slowly march ahead. Okay, so we all know what the notion of a vector is in three-dimensional geometry. You think of a vector as a directed arrow, okay, as a geometrical object in 3D geometry. A vector is a geometrical object which has a magnitude and a direction, right? It's a geometrical object with a magnitude and a direction. Okay, so this is just an arrow. So you can imagine a vector to be an arrow with a magnitude and a direction. Okay, so this geometrical definition of a vector is very useful and it's important, because this definition is independent of any coordinate frame, okay, or any coordinate system. It's independent of any coordinate system that you choose to describe the vector with. Okay, so this is a very general geometric definition of a vector, but whenever you are doing some problems in physics or even transport phenomena, you know that you will first choose a coordinate frame, right? So we'll typically choose a Cartesian coordinate frame, right? Okay, we'll label them, typically you will label them X, let's say here, Y and Z. Okay, and then you will say that I'm going to place this vector like this. Oops. This is my vector. Now then you will say that let's call this vector A. In my course the vector A will be denoted as A with an underscore. In textbooks you will see that people use boldface fonts to represent vectors. That is the thing that is possible in textbooks, but in my lectures I will use an underscore to denote a vector. Okay, now so what you will do using elementary geometry is to say that using simple principles of vector addition, we will also call the unit vector in this direction as I, in this direction as J, okay, and in this direction as K. These are the three unit vectors in the three Cartesian coordinate directions. Then you will say that the vector A, from elementary principles of vector addition, that it is AXI plus AYJ plus AZK. Okay, in your earlier courses you might have used a cap to denote a unit vector. Just for the sake of simplicity I will remove the cap. Okay, so all these are unit vectors. These are vectors with unit magnitudes and pointing in the respective coordinate direction. Okay. Now these are, so this is a vector in 3 dimension, and this vector A is a vector in 3 dimensions, and it has these components ax, ay and az with respect to this coordinate frame. Obviously, if you choose a different coordinate frame, these components will change, but the same vector can be represented in terms of, let's say, a different set of components. Because the coordinate frame is not unique that you choose to describe, so the same vector can be described using a different set of components in terms of a different set of unit vectors. So a vector is not simply its components are merely the way in which you represent a vector in a given coordinate frame. A vector is much more than its components. We will come to this point as we go along. Now, first thing that I want you to understand is, we can, from 3 dimensions, you can go to n dimensions. Okay. You need not always restrict yourself to 3 dimensions. Now these vectors do not, obviously these are not geometric vectors. These are something more general. Okay. Suppose, so you can ask the question, how do I get an n-dimensional vector? What do you mean to say it's an n-dimensional vector? I can give you a very practical example. Suppose you have a domain between 0 and L. Let's say this is the length along metal bar in which you are trying to understand heat conduction, and let's say you do not know how to solve the problem analytically. So if you solve it numerically, you will try to discretize the domain. A computer cannot solve for the temperature at all the points along the length of the metal bar. So you will say that the temperature is now an array of numbers. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's say, so temperature will be represented by an array of 10 numbers. So this is an example of a 10-dimensional vector. I'm just trying to tell you how you get higher dimensional vectors. Suppose you discretize it to a instead of 10 points, if you discretize it to 100 points, you will get a 100-dimensional vector, and so on, right? So it's clear that the way in which you can generalize from 3 to n dimensions is useful, because in many applications, such as in numerical solution of problems, you do discretize your domains and describe your physical variables only along certain points in the domain, and the value of these physical variables such as temperature along those points are basically they constitute a vector. Okay. So well, the point is, it's then becomes very difficult to visualize it, because our mind can just visualize 3 dimensions very easily, but you can say that this will represent an abstract vector in an n-dimensional space. Okay. And the vector itself is independent of coordinate system. Okay. So now we'll first introduce some terminology. What is a vector space? Okay. These are called axioms. Axioms are something that cannot be proved. We have to assume these, and then we will proceed and we'll derive many other useful results from these axioms. A collection of objects A, B, C called vectors form a linear vector space V if you have a bunch of objects which you think of them as vectors. For example, we have given vectors in 3 dimensions and then to higher dimensions. Okay. So if the following conditions or axioms are satisfied, if the set remains closed under addition. What is the meaning of this? Closed under addition means if A is an element of the vector space, if B is an element of the vector space, then A plus B is also an element of the E. This E represents element of or belongs to. In common English, this can be thought of as belongs to. Okay. Now this is one of the first axioms. These are something that you might have seen in your high school. When you discuss number systems, you discuss axioms and so on. These are very similar to that, but now we are generalizing it to vectors. They are commutative and associative. What does this mean? Commutative means A plus B is B plus A. Associative means A plus B plus C is equal to A plus B plus C. These are somewhat commonsensical when you think about normal numbers, but they also these axioms are also generalized for vectors as well. Okay. The set is closed under multiplication by a scalar. A scalar is a number which can be a real or complex number, in general a complex number. A scalar in my notation means a complex number. Okay. So if vector A is an element of this vector space, then if lambda is that complex number, lambda times A is also an element of the same vector space. Finally, we have so this is closed under multiplication by a scalar. So lambda is the scalar in my notation here. Finally, we have this distributive property. We have lambda times A plus B is lambda A plus lambda times B, and if you have two constants, lambda plus mu times A, two scalars, I'm sorry, then this is lambda A plus mu A, lambda mu scalars. So even if I don't say it's scalars, if there is no underscore, that means it's a scalar. Okay. And finally, lambda times mu A is lambda mu times A. This is called distributive associative. So these are the properties that the vectors, if they obey, then they are said to form a vector space. Now there exists a null vector A plus 0 giving A, that is 0 vector is called the null vector. Note that I am not just putting the number 0, I am putting the vector 0. Okay. So this is for all A. If I take any A in the vector space and add the 0 vector, then you will get back the same vector. Now if you multiply any vector by unity, the unit scalar, you get back the same. So 1 is the unit scalar. Okay. Now you have negative of a vector which is denoted as minus A, such that A plus minus A gives you the 0 vector. This is the meaning of the negative vector. Okay. Now all this is something that is intuitive for you. You might have seen this used in simple real numbers and so on, but they are also extended to the notion of vectors. Okay. If we restrict, if the scalars are real numbers, notice that I am using scalars, then the vector space is called a real vector space. Okay. One example of the real vector space is the 3D geometric space that we started off with in this module. Okay. If we allow for complex, if scalars are allowed to be complex in general, then you say that you have a complex vector space. Okay. Now, so far all the axioms that we have laid out have no reference to magnitude or direction of the vector. In order to do that, we'll have to invoke some additional properties and definitions. We'll come to that shortly. Okay. So according to this, if any object satisfies this set of axioms, then it's a vector space. Obviously, a set of arrows will satisfy this. So set of geometric arrows will form a vector space. But you can also have additional objects which can satisfy this. For example, consider the set of all 2 by 2 matrices. Okay, then this is also a genuine vector space. If you use all these rules, then we have no sense of magnitude or direction of a matrix, obviously, but still it can form a vector space because it will follow all these axioms. Okay, so we need not be restricted to thinking about vectors in terms of arrows, although they are vectors. But from now on, when we say vectors, we mean something that we are referring to objects that are much more general than the usual arrows that we are familiar with. The key thing, other key thing that you have to remember is that when we say a real or complex vector space, it is not the vectors that are real or complex, it is the scalars that are in the vector space that are real or complex. The vectors themselves are neither real nor complex. They are abstract quantities. Vectors are neither real nor complex. Vectors themselves are abstract quantities. So when we say real or complex vector space, we are obviously referring only to the scalars that are present in the vector space. Okay. Now we come to a very important idea in vector space, that is called the span of a set of vectors. What is meant by span of a set of vectors? Span of a set of vectors A, B, C, so on up to S is defined as the set of all vectors that may be written as a linear sum of the original set. Okay, so this is the original set. Okay, what is the span of this set? X is written as alpha A plus beta B plus gamma C plus sigma S. Okay, where alpha, beta are scalars. Okay, so you try to find the set of all vectors that can be formed by linear combination or linear sum of the original set of vectors. That will become the span. Okay, then if when you do this, right, if x becomes 0 for some, so you have to consider all choices of alpha, beta, gamma. But if you take a linear sum of all these given set of vectors A, B, C, so on up to S, if the linear combination becomes 0 for some combination of some choice of alpha, beta, gamma, sigma, then we say the vectors A, B, so on up to S are linearly dependent. This is a very important concept in vector spaces and linear algebra. Okay, for some choice of alpha beta such that not all these are 0. One or two may be 0, but not all of them are 0. Then we say that the vectors A, B, C, so on up to S are linearly dependent. Okay. Now, so what is the meaning of linearly dependent? That means that once you have x to be 0, that means one of the vectors can be expressed, they can be pulled out to the other side, and it can be expressed in terms of the other vectors. That is, one of the vectors is redundant. That is, you need not have them in the original set, because it itself can be represented as a sum of all the other vectors. Okay, so this is a very important idea. So now let's get back to span. So let's think about 1D space of vectors, one dimensional space. Okay, so you have geometrical x-axis. Okay, this is the x-axis. Right, now you consider vectors that lie along the x-axis. Say A, B, C, and so on. Okay, now the only thing that changes, because all of them are pointing in the same direction, which is the x direction, the only thing that changes is the magnitude or length of the arrow. Right, so you can always say B is some alpha, or you can always say A can be written as some alpha times B, or A minus alpha B is 0. Sorry, alpha B is 0. That means that these two vectors, as per this criterion, are linearly dependent. So A and B are linearly dependent, because this is exactly what we were trying to say. If you find alpha and beta, not all of them 0, such that the linear sum is 0, the x is 0, then they are linearly dependent. So vectors lying on a line are linearly dependent. So any two or more collinear vectors, if you take any two or more collinear vectors, then we can write one of them as a linear combination of the others. Okay, right. So now let's take generalized to 2D plane. It's not 1D line, it's 2D plane. Okay, just for the sake of clarity, I'm trying to draw a 2D plane here. This is my plane. Now consider any two vectors A, B. Okay, now A and B are not collinear as the way I have drawn them. A and B, they are not collinear. So if they are not collinear, then I cannot write one in terms of as some constant times others, as I was able to do for the 1D case. Therefore A and B are, suppose I take alpha A plus beta B, and I take all possible combinations of alpha and beta, then the resulting x, which is the span of these two vectors, non-collinear vectors on a plane A and B, the span will be the entire plane, entire xy plane, let's say, because you will take all combinations of A and B. So it will the vector, that the resultant vector that you will get will be pointing, depending on the values you choose for alpha and beta, it will cover the entire space. Right, that is exactly what we mean by span. So you will span the entire plane. So the entire plane becomes the span of these two vectors A and B. Now suppose I take the same example, I add a third vector. Suppose I take the same example, I add a third vector C. Okay, then we are definitely, these three cannot be collinear. I mean, these three cannot be linearly independent, because you can always write the third vector as a linear combination of the first two. Okay, so we can conclude that any three vectors on a plane are linearly dependent, because you can write one in terms of the other. In general, in an n-dimensional space, now I'm going to generalize to n-dimensional space, right? If I take a linear sum of n vectors like this, alpha I, ai, alpha I are scalars, ai are vectors. If this is 0, then the vectors ai, I going from 1 to n, the n vectors are linearly independent if and only if, when I write IFF, it means if and only if all the alpha i's are 0. Okay, if you find one set of non-trivial combination of alpha i's such that the sum is 0, then they become linearly dependent. Okay, so the n vectors are not linearly independent, they are linearly dependent. So this is very useful and important idea. Okay, now this leads us naturally to the notion of what is called the dimension of a vector space, of an arbitrary vector space. Okay, so far I am trying to appeal to your idea or geometric intuition of geometrical plane, but what is the dimension of a vector space? If there are n linearly independent vectors but no set of n plus 1 linearly independent vectors, then the vector space is n-dimensional. Okay, because if you don't have any set of n plus 1 linearly independent vector, what does it mean? That any vector other than these n linearly independent vectors can be represented in terms of these n linearly independent vectors. So therefore we say that the dimension, because any vector can be expressed in this space, can be expressed in terms of these n linearly independent vectors, we say that the dimension of that vector space is n. Okay, to begin with, we are going to discuss with finite dimensional vector spaces. What do you mean by finite dimensional? N, okay, that is, you have the vectors have I is equal to 1, 2, 3, so on up to n. Okay, n can be as large as you want, but it's still finite. Eventually we will go to infinite dimensional vector space. Okay, we'll do this a bit later, but this is also an important idea. Okay, so we'll then argue that functions are actually vectors in an infinite dimensional vector space. Okay, we'll discuss this a bit later. Arising out of this notion of dimension and span, we'll come to a very important notion. It's called the basis of a vector space. Any set of n linearly independent vectors in an n-dimensional space is called a basis in that space. What does this mean? The reason is that if the vector space is n-dimensional and if you have precisely n linearly independent vectors with you, any vector in that vector space can be written as a sum or a linear combination of, so let's call these ei's, I going from 1 to n. These are the n linearly independent vectors. Okay, let me use capital N here just to be consistent with my notation. Okay, so you can write any vector in that vector space as a linear combination of some coefficients vi. These are called the components of v in the given basis. Okay, with respect to this basis, this set of linearly independent vectors, we this set of coefficients make a form the components of the vector. Okay, right. So we also talked about linear independence. We'll just formally write this down. What is meant by linear independence? Linear independence is such that a set of vectors AI is linearly independent if all alpha i's are 0 in I going from 1 to n. That is, this set of vectors AI, if you linearly combine them, they'll give you a 0 vector only if all the coefficients that you multiply, okay, are 0. If a set of vector is not linearly independent, then you can, let's say, express vector A3 in terms of I is equal to 1 to n, I not equal to 3 minus alpha I by alpha 3 times AI. You can simply write one vector in terms of other vectors because this set is not linearly independent. Okay, so you can always find a constant alpha 3 which is non-zero, such that this whole thing will give rise to 0. So this is the meaning of linear independence and linear dependence. Okay, now just before I end this module, I'll give a couple of examples in linear independence. Suppose I consider these vectors 1 1 0, 1 0 1, 3 2 1. Now the question is, are they linearly independent? Okay, so Li will stand for linearly independent. So what do? We have to ask this question: 1 1 0, coefficient alpha 1, alpha 2 times 1 0 1 plus alpha 3 times 3 2 1. Okay, do we get non-trivial solutions for alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3 for the above problem? What is meant by non-trivial? Non-trivial means non-zero. Obviously, if you put alpha 1 0, alpha 2 0, alpha 3 0, this entire equation will be satisfied. We are not interested in those solutions. We are interested in non-zero alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. Now how do we do this? We simply multiply alpha 1 by the first row, alpha 1 times this plus alpha 2 times this plus alpha 3 times this, and so on. So you'll get a set of 3 equations. So this implies, the third equation implies alpha 2 is minus alpha 3. Okay, so the second equation implies alpha 1 is minus 2 alpha 3. If I substitute this in the first equation, instead of alpha 1 I'll put minus 2 alpha 3, instead of alpha 2 I'll put minus alpha 3, and then you have plus alpha 3. Okay, if I substitute this, it automatically is satisfied. That means I can take alpha 3 to be anything. Okay, so that means that these three I can have a non-zero alpha 3, still this is satisfied. That means that these three three vectors allow for a non-trivial solution for alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, such that this equation is satisfied. That means that they are linearly dependent. Okay, alpha 3 can be anything, still you satisfy. Now let's take an example, second example. Now I ask the question, you have 1 1 0 plus 1 0 1 plus 0 1 1 is 0. Answer is the question is, do you have a set of alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3 which are non-trivial such that this equation is satisfied? So again we'll expand this out. Alpha 1 plus alpha 2 plus 0 alpha 3 is 0. Okay. Second equation will give alpha 1 plus alpha 3 is 0. Third equation will give alpha 2 plus alpha 3 is 0. So this implies alpha 1 is minus alpha 2. This implies alpha 1 is minus alpha 3. Okay, so if I substitute this back out here, you have minus alpha 1, because this alpha 2 is minus alpha 1, alpha 3 is minus alpha 1. So you'll get minus 2 alpha 1 is 0, or alpha 1 is 0. From these equations, that means that alpha 2 is 0, alpha 3 is 0. So that means that these three vectors are linearly independent. Okay, because we get only the trivial solution for alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. Okay. All right. Now we discussed the notion of basis. Let's revisit. Okay, if V is an n-dimensional vector space, then any set of linearly independent, n linearly independent vectors forms a basis for the vector space V. That because any vector x can be represented in terms of these n linearly independent vectors. Okay, so and also you can show that alpha 1 e1 plus alpha 2 e2 alpha n en is 0 only if, or if and only if, all the alpha i's are 0. And now the point is, if you take any other vector x, then you will say that alpha 1 e1 plus alpha 2 e2 alpha n en plus beta x is 0. Okay, now this will happen even if beta is non-zero, because this set of vectors is linearly independent. If I add some more vectors, then that will become linearly dependent. That means that you can always find a beta that is non-zero. So you can express any vector in terms of, so I take x on this side, I will write minus alpha I by beta ei. Okay, so you can rewrite this as x, as you can call xi as minus alpha I by beta. So any vector x can be written as some coefficients xi times, so this I am calling as xi, okay, times ei. Okay, so if any vector such as x can be represented, if any vector x lying in the span of V can be expressed in terms of the basis vectors, then we say the set ei forms a complete set. What is a complete set? If we have a set of n linearly independent vectors in an n-dimensional space, they are complete because any vector that is lying in the span of this vector space can be written in terms of these basis vectors, or these linearly independent vectors. Now, so what we are saying is, therefore x can be written as summation xi ei. Okay, now these where xi's are the components of the vector x in this basis. Now these components are unique provided you fix the basis. Suppose I say, let me just write xi's, they are unique. How do you prove that? Suppose they are not unique, then you will have yi ei, you will have another set. Then I can subtract this and you will get xi minus yi times ei. But ei's are a set of linearly independent vectors. So if I have a set of linear sum of combinations of some constants and ei, then that will be 0 if and only if xi minus yi is 0 or xi is equal to yi. Okay, so this is a very useful idea, that this representation or the components of a given vector in a given basis is always unique. Okay, so the key idea again is that if you have any n set of linearly independent vectors, they form a basis. They form a basis in the vector space, in the n-dimensional vector space. Okay, and you need not only write x in terms of xi ei, you can also write x as some summation xi prime ei prime, where ei prime are another set of bases in the same vector space. Okay, so it is possible to write the same vector in terms of a given basis or a different basis. The only thing that will be different here is that the coefficients need not be the same. If you have the same basis, then we have shown that the coefficients are unique because xi is yi, that's what we have shown. Okay, so we'll stop here with this in this module. In the next module, what we'll do is to generalize these notions to involve magnitude, angles, and so on. Okay, thank you.